Halfway along, leaning outwards, sheer metal salt rusted, holding his wafer musket, he guards behind him regimental memories of penny and the slot machines, pea sour shelters, and up at the crenellated pavilion, desperate grease paint troops. The sun has got his hat on and is coming out today. Or the murder in the Red Barn, trying to drown the noise of swell on girders and shut out the sewage outfall smell. He must have been a merry soldier, red moon-face, eyebrows wrapped at dodgems, milk bar, tell your fortune, care of cave of love, pint of shrimps, mouth telling you it was safe to spend another sixpence. Now, one eye glaucomatous, mouth twisted in a stroke, it's hard for him to know what of soldiery is still expected. How to see the nude cardboard general pacing the prom, pointing his bladdered stick at the old brigade, net curtained above takeaway and adult videos and a fun arcade. He grates on his spine, high and quiet, sways that way and this, but seems angled at a dog on the shingle, one ear cocked, peeing at thrust and hiss. And the last two poems that I want to read are both from the last collection, which, with the help and advice of Harry Chambers, the publisher of the Peterloo volumes, Caroline and others, and Will Wayne. I was just saying Will Wayne, yes, and we came together and we put together this wonderful, I think, last collection, which is every bit as good as the other three. And the two poems I'd like to read from that are, first of all, Early. Ah, but there are days that come fresh from under stars so close and clear that you want to stoop. Days that hug enough of dew never to be knowing and old, that keep the tang of wet in roots, and wisdom gets no further than a droplet in a nettle, teaching the sun about colour. Then, as morning stays early, there can be the very near, catching the run of an ant on the wall, or this intimate breath of moss, or that spider tying a can to a tap. Then as the roof tiles prink out their wiry lichen, the clouds argue about shape and how many shadows to let race across the hillside maze. Then, still new, it is old as grass, old as the first rain, old as the first creatures, new as wonder. And the last poem that I want to read from this collection is entitled Window, and I should have made a note of which page it's on. 19, thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much. Right. And I said in the introductory remarks that one of the things that Brian was very good at was homing in on little tiny details, little particular things, to look at a fly in a window pane, or look at the cicada, or look at, in this case, I won't preempt what I'm just going to say because it's self-explanatory, but the details of this poem I think are absolutely wonderful. Window. As to this particular one, I am the world expert. Its position on the wall, the proportion of frame to glass, the fact that on the left the frame is thicker than on the right, that top left is not a right angle, that halfway down on the right the joiner left a gap that the painter couldn't bridge, that on the left, anyway, the painter slurped a bit with a small half moon on the glass. And yes, the glass. Apply to me if you want to know the position of the 5 wavy floors or the 6 differently sized spots that the cleaner missed. As to looking through it, up or down or right or left, is difficult from a bed, but consult me if you need to on anything to do with one particular patch, those special square inches of sky that come and go and change colour without any seeming reason. That's a wonderful poem. Right, now this is the piece, I'm just going to read it, that I wrote when I was asked to write a piece about I suppose the mutual benefit of having a rigorous critic who will voice what you perhaps acknowledge in yourself but don't want to admit as a writer. When Brian Waltham died, I not only lost a good friend, but also my sternest critic. For a quarter of a century, we had exchanged our work by correspondence, often writing to each other twice in 1 week. His handwriting on the envelope would induce a tremor of anticipation. If I'd written something I was pleased with, I knew that his endorsement would see me through the rest of the day on a high. If I'd foolishly hoped to slip a weak line or a dodgy stanza past him, somehow, as soon as his letter landed on the mat, I knew that I was in for it, and that within days, sometimes hours, I should be sending back a revised version. This was the measure of the trust we had in each other and the respect we had for each other's work. Perhaps above all, Brian urged risk and deplored the fudge of security. First do it, and then decide whether you can do it, was what he once advised me. If I sent him a poem in an overfamiliar vein, or relying on what the painter Frank Auerbach has called the safety net of manner, it would wing straight back to me marked vieux taupe, or poorly said, old mole. He'd almost always be right, and more importantly, he'd be voicing my own disappointment in myself. That's what a good critic does. Between poets, the truest friendship is the most rigorous. And nothing should be more bracing for a writer than his or her readers' articulate reservations. So if I have any advice to pass on to other poets, it's this. Seek out your own Brian Waltham. Or if you've already found him or her, don't let false praise, the need for reassurance, or amour propre compromise the relationship. Nothing is more seductively pointless than that murmur of seeming appreciation, bafflement, embarrassment, polite indifference, too often heard at poetry group read rounds. It could well mean that what you have just read has already been forgotten, whereas detailed engagement, however uncomfortable it may feel at first, is always a compliment. Don't bridle in self-defense. Give generously, as good as you get. With luck, you may have met your Brian Waltham. As for me, mine has become a ghostly reader over my shoulder, and he still doesn't let me get away with anything. Now, I wrote that back probably in about 2003 at the request of a magazine with them. And that last, of course, it's an allusion to Robert Graves' famous remark about the reader over your shoulder if you're a writer. I can say that although I wrote that in 2003, it still applies now in 2014. At which point I'm now going to hand back to Caroline.
Distinguished poet. Brian was equally terrified of letters arriving from John, and they went backwards and forth very quickly. It was back in the days of snail mail.
Exactly, I was going to say, goodness knows if we were emailers now.
It'd be terrible, but Brian had a heavy correspondence going with Ronald and with Cyril, and letters would arrive, but you moved on into emails, didn't you? But it was a really serious, old-fashioned sort of correspondence of thought and who's been reading what and heaven knows. You mentioned the thing writer and poet. I just have to say that when Brian retired, do you remember passports used to say what your profession was? And when it always said lawyer, and then Brian had retired and he needed a new passport and he thought, dare I? He put writer. And it came back from Petit France as waiter. And if any of you have ever had the experience of being with Brian in a restaurant, which was difficult, wasn't it? He didn't get on very well with waiters. A row of Walthams there and laughter. He thought, dare he change this A into an R? But on the other hand, he might be arrested and locked up. So he didn't dare go on being waiter, so he sent it back, and rather boringly came back as writer. But I wish it had gone on saying waiter. Some of John's poems are on sale. Janet, can you hold up John's volume? John has written, I forgot what it's called.
It's called Treatment.
It's called Treatment. If any of you know anybody who's ever had any chemotherapy, and I know about 10 people who've had the same, and I'm sure we all do.
It's not a grim book.
It's not a grim book at all. It's a wonderful book. He says all doctors, the Lancet said every doctor, hands up doctors, I can see at least 2, should have copies of it. Janet over there is selling copies for £5 each, as we are selling Brian's books.
And
So
I should also
for a
say that
£5.
£1.50 of every sale goes to Macmillan Nurses. Since it came out, it's though I say it myself, it's in its third printing. So we've been able to give quite a lot of money to Macmillan Nurses. So it's a £5, and sorry, it's not me who should be talking about my poetry. It's Brian's poetry we gave it. But if anyone wants it, that's.
Yes, and Macmillan Nurses. Janet, I think I'm right, aren't I? That was it the wife of the manager of this pub died of
Yes,
cancer?
and his partner subsequently. So he's lost 2 people very close to him to cancer, which is why there is a large collecting tub there, because in lieu of room hire, we're asked to contribute to Macmillan. And of course the Macmillan Cancer Centre is the newest part of the redevelopment of University College London Hospital.
Yes, so I don't know what pubs normally charge for a room, but a lot of money, so we're getting it for £1 each. So please give generously into the tub, which is somewhere there in the middle when it comes to refreshment time. There's some very generous looking refreshments to come later. Now, has everybody got a programme? Hands up who hasn't got a programme. Both Janets back there have programmes. You've got one.
I suspect that others will repeat much of what John has said about Brian. I was very privileged to live at the bottom of Brian and Caroline's garden for about 20 years, and my study looked up, and there I saw Brian writing poetry. I was 50, I think, when I met him, and we were 20 plus years, I think, probably. I was Dean of Postgraduate Medicine. I'd written 2 books. I thought that I'd arrived at my career and it was finished. I had met all my tick boxes. And then I met Brian. And there's a book called The Season of a Man's Life. And he just taught me that there are very many seasons in a man's life, and Brian was one who continually seemed to discover new seasons, and he helped me. And I wouldn't be here tonight, and the last 20 years have been shaped by Brian in the way that I think John has talked about him. I love some of the things you said, John, and I just want to repeat them. Something about a sort of... I've chosen a poem which for me was really Brian as a fantasy womanizer, because I felt possibly that he helped me as well in my fantasies about women. And this is out of the Music for Brass, and it's called the Cocktail Party Survival Kit. And I think one of the things no one's mentioned, so I'll mention it, is this whole business of performance poetry, and Brian could read his poems in a way that I certainly can't. And he had this capacity, I think, to hold the tension and just allow you to sort of wait for the phrase that was going to actually come through. So I will do my best to read this poem, but I certainly can't read it as well as Brian did. Okay. What do you say? Can you hear me at the back all right? What do you say to the girl? I can't see.
No, we knew that was going to be a problem.
Come forward a little bit, it'll help.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ronald. What do you say to the girl, 17, with a straining shirt, who has just discovered Marla? Best of all, called away by the police about your wife. Failing that, try that sort of smile that goes sideways, or in any case, never near the shirt. If your mouth won't do the smile, kick one leg sharply many times with the foot of the other leg and aim at a clean fracture. While waiting for the ambulance, on no account discuss gardens, apples, reptiles, or what comes between Mahler and Bach.
Across Leadenhall Street, I saw him and forgot city manners and yelled out, "Bob!" 3 buses passed, and there he was on the other curb, wanting to smile. He wasn't Bob, but he wanted to be. A truck, 2 more buses, and each of us was still standing there, waving apologies. Will it be the same across the crowded Styx? Will it be his turn to forget the manners of the place? Will I be hopeful at a shout and wait on the bank as the deep-laden barges go through nose to tail? And the other poem is called St. Francis in Tarn-et-Garonne, where your house is. Yes, Béthune. Many of you will have experienced it. He's very good with insects, isn't he, Brian? St. Francis in Tarn-et-Garonne, brother mosquito, air frame that art so light, singing high in the dark with thy needle, and I already wounded with thy love. Brother mosquito, prayer has given us the electric light and this holy can of fly tox. Brother mosquito, let us be cheerful and praise God. Soon thou shalt be one with him, or, if my aim is marred by error, one with me again.
Sadly, I didn't know Brown well, but I did meet him shortly before he died a couple of times. I love his poetry. The first one I was going to read, it fits with what John said about his eye for detail. It's called Rabbits at Harvest. Yes, it does seem satisfying. First, a machine round the field's edge. Nothing much to worry about, but best to get in the middle. Then families begin to be jammed together, quarrelling, some foreign, some with burrows to guard, and young bucks excited and oldies who said it meant nothing. Then the afternoon getting tall with what couldn't happen, a noise like childbirth, and almost overhead the cut and slash of blades, dog yelp, screaming, running, straw ghettos shrinking, fights at the burrows, oldies trampled, and the sky yelling, "There's plenty of them in there." Then the first to bolt, zigzag, a treat for the guns and the dogs, and now any which way, breaking cover, too many for the dogs to get them all. But there was a doe who crouched over her young, peeing on her legs in fright, and held up the tractor. Even the dogs didn't know what to do about that. And the next one is Uncle George. Uncle George. He came just once when I was 3. He laughed a lot with a big face, and all the rest were quiet. Aunt Nell knew about him, but she always went behind a smile. Once or twice he sent presents that must have cost a bomb. We never thanked him. He didn't seem to have an address. Aunt Nell would say forgivingly, people have their little weaknesses. When the family said anything, it said it was a family that didn't have people like Uncle George in it. There was a snap in the album, not like all the others with a name and a date. Someone with Mum's look when she was hiding something. And an Aunt Nell postcard. And Dad walking up and down with his toast saying, "Oh no, not again."
Reference to the Great War, celebrating well, the version I've got is about probate. Fresh in khaki, snapped yesterday astride a fairground tiger, ready for an arc, cocky face, it's just been laughing, cap at an angle, and here, underneath, carefully looped, tongue tight, tongue in cheek, yours always, Jeff. No letters, no giveaway that you never came back from the song, or came back different, or simply that she chucked you among flower sprays and socks into her spinster trunk. Was it yours always, hers always? Jeff, your girl became Aunt Laura. Her 2 weeks in the year, Paynton, Lou, Sidmouth, and 50 years in this maid's attic above the clergy house. Like her, this room is private. But did she, I wonder, sometimes reach down for you, who never grew a day older? Shall I carry on?
Why don't you carry on when you're there, Chris?
There's another one in a
very
completely
small
different...
observation.
Oh, sorry, yes, absolutely. Okay, yes, sorry.
John
yeah.
wants to say,
Just a quick word about that as I was following it on page 33. I don't know if anyone else was. It's a wonderful example of how Brian worked at his poems and altered them and changed them, because that's radically different from the published version.
From the published one, yes.
And it's wonderful to hear it, fascinating to hear it, and how Jeff morphs into Tom in the and how Newking disappears.
was there really an Aunt Laura?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes.
Who did
mother's
lose her
sister.
chap on the song
was
and
look-
was a spinster? I
Yes,
thought there
yes, and she looked after a priest for a few
Our,
decades.
our grandmother's sister.
Yes, yes,
were. Right,
yes.
yes.
Well, there's another one here in a completely different vein. It's more in the same vein as the mosquito that we just heard. And the title I've got is Wimbledon and I don't know what the official title is.
Chris has got early versions.
I've got
of
early
them.
versions, yes. Anyway, I don't know what of it's then either.
Yeah,
It's in the hang
Brian
of
sent Chris
Well, I've
poems
got
in
a
progress,
word for
and
it,
Chris
yeah.
is reading from those rather than what
Yeah.
we've got.
Anyway, so the title here is Wimbledon and
This is a wonderful one.
40 Love. One moment, Mr. Becker. Will dark-haired girl in the white blouse and red scarf, apparently on her own, second row in the north stand, 4 from the end, please go urgently to flat 3A, 14th floor, Jubilee Tower, East Bexley, where a viewer who has seen her only for a moment knows that he would never get tired of her face. Thank you, Mr. Becker. 40 Love.
I think that one is just wonderful.
And then, now the other one I've got is, well, I've actually got 2 versions of it. I'm going to read out one, and this is one that's inédit. It isn't
Unpublished.
Unpublished. It's called Cello. So I'm cellist, and I'm playing on the bit of the girl, as he calls the instrument, as you will see, cello. Dog in manger, I've holed you up all these years, well cased and warm, meaning to come back, leaving you like a girl that didn't get the loving. Girl, not woman, always girl. Though it's more than 2 centuries that you grew up in Venice, and then like a dark brown slave, was sold to the highest bidder. Then, many owners, some may be slave to you, forgetting any other girl, some drunk and played out, leaving you on the sawdust of a bar. Some lovers slowly knowing that girls like you come slowly. Some, as anyone can see, not so kind, breaking the neck you were given, kicking your belly, gouging at your slim shoulders. And one, I hope, who knew you utterly, matched you against the very best company. And girl again, bought and sold. This time it was me, starting too late with G major scale and my faltering early Haydn. Now this is an unfinished poem. It stops with a comma, and I don't have the second sheet. I don't think he did anymore. But I've got another version of it, which is it's actually quite different.
And who is playing that cello now?
Who's playing that cello now? Oh, voilà. I don't know whether you want to hear the other version. I have got it.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
This was printed on the back of a thing for Ryanair. So start straight in. Cello. Girl, not woman. Though it's 2 centuries since you were bred in Venice and sold away like a dark brown slave. Many owners, some slave to you, some played out drunk, leaving you on sawdust floors, some would-be lovers, learning slowly that you come slowly. Maybe one that was husband, took you into crinlined rooms where you sang how true he was. And more than a few orchestra third desk hacks, and one at least who loved you enough to break your neck and then, as best he could, make it better. Time now for me, an old dog with not a trick left, to let you go and take your chance. You owning more than a bit of me, finding someone once again worth singing for. It's quite different.
Thank you, Chris.
No. But I'm very interested, because Brian and I are both great admirers of Robert Graves. So I think quite a strong influence on both of us as writer. And Robert Graves said one should always end on a careless comma.
Maybe it was
Now we all know that later in his life Brian did become obsessed with the idea of dying and everything to do with the events that happened to one at that stage. This one is called Wheelchair Meeting. Not much left to spare, but there is a companionship of saying nothing. Parked out here in the sun, each probably understands that the other is there. And more than that, each may feel that if words could be said and heard, they would be the right words, probably. And perhaps even more, that in and out of time there could have been, that other meeting under these clenched knuckles of wisteria with their slippery load of memory. That's it.
Thank you, Brian, from LSE days, is that right?
Well, it's only 55 years ago that you're talking of. Yes.
I thought it was
19
Cambridge, wasn't it?
No, he went to Cambridge. I went to Oxford afterwards. That's
I'm
another
sure
story.
I have a photograph that has you in it with him in Cambridge.
Oh, well, maybe one went there occasionally. One's not safe even 55 years later. Me and co. No, the death of a friend doesn't prostrate, desolate, devastate, or any of that snow-burying avalanche of verbs. Morning wants breakfast. The sun comes up better than yesterday. The post is late again, and the cat is cat with her own personal problems. Only that this moon gear, this oxygen tent,
This bubble of world is incomplete and that much smaller for want of someone who should be replaceable, but isn't.
Jumble all over the study will help to make an initial selection.
Thank you very much, yes.
The hang of it.
I never met Brian, but I'm sure it's a dismal cliche, but reading his poetry, I feel I did meet him in a way, you know, I did get to know him. So, from the palace window. Reading the big cardboard books, I always found it difficult that the lovers would grow into mummy and daddy, king and queen, and get fat and talk of money. Fumbling a princess in the dark always risks more than innocence. Beyond the door, the old fear, a room of demands, simple as love and tall as wallpaper animals. And after dragons, it was hard that my queens broke the rules of the story, offered gifts which were not allowed, spied into my toy box and would not turn to stone. And this one's called Wallpaper. One more peek from you lot, yelled Dad, putting out the light, and the animals will come out of the wallpaper. And they did. 15 tigers with ABC is easy and holiday snaps pinned on them, 9.5 lions, and a small herd of smudged rhinos, all of them boss-eyed, and all of them wanted to get back into the wall. The kids used potties to clean up the droppings, tried to keep the noise down, offered illegal crisps and Smarties, and began the job of shoving them back in. The lions went in best, 7 whole ones and 3 tails. Some of the tigers, still boss-eyed, would only fit in upside down. Waiting for Dad in the morning, 3 and a bit smudged rhinos.
Doing illustrations.
Right. Well, as Caroline Lyne has implied, I'm not an illustrator, so it was almost by accident that I illustrated the covers of Brown's books. And it came about because Brown needed a picture of a marching band for Music for Brass to go on the cover. And he asked me, because I'm a visual artist, to try and find one. And I actually couldn't find anything that related to the liveliness of his writing. So, uninvited, I did a few drawings and dared to send them to Brown. And I was a bit, queasy about it, but he telephoned the next day and he said, I really like the drawings, Tingle, but please can they be in colour, and please can the band be marching forward. So I spent a weekend doing paintings of marching bands, and Brown really liked them, and he sent them to Harry at Peterloo Poets, who also really liked them. And they chose that picture for the cover of Music for Brass, in case you haven't got it in front of you. And as a bonus for me, that one on the back. And then when, about 4 years later, Harry was going to publish a second collection, Brown asked me if I would illustrate the cover, and I said yes, of course, be delighted. A poem about a mad bird and waking up at 4 in the morning. And I wanted the bird to be manic and predatory, but sort of slightly unbalanced. And I was at Harwood House near Leeds, and they had some stuffed magpies in the case. So I drew them, and I showed Brown some of the drawings, and together we came up with this for the cover, which is sort of, I hope, in the spirit of this rather sort of lively poem. Then the third collection, which John has read, The Soldier on the Pier, was a much more sort of thoughtful and sad subject, looking back on sort of sunny days from a rather dismal present. And again, I did several drawings, and Brian chose this one, which was the cover. And then, very wonderfully, after Brian died, 9 and, got it down here, Will sorted all through,
And John.
and John, his poems, and all three made the selection for the book The Hang of It. And I was really, really, really delighted to be asked to do this final cover. And I drew the stages of somebody's life, or tried to, sort of follow them, which is what the poem is about, and about the writer not quite getting the hang of it. And then on the back, I went right through the life to the end of life, and that was the final end of the book, the final image on the cover. And I had enormous fun doing the illustrations, the paintings, and I really value this connection with Brian's work. I really do. I think I was enormously lucky. Thank you very much.
Well, I think I'm going to read The Hang of It, because she's just been talking about
Yes.
that. And then would it be a good time to have our pause, Janet, or not just yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Hang of It. So this is the title poem, not Will's Wallpaper Animals. So it would have been, you would have had fun doing the lions being pushed back into the water. You get the hang of it. You get the hang of infancy. Suddenly it's puberty. You get the hang of girls and bedding. Suddenly you're in a wedding. You hock your soul for this brood of cooling wife, listless girl, and growing lout. And suddenly the tide's gone out. You learn to be old, to go where you're told, which day it is, which tablets, and on which couch you should be lying. You begin to get the hang of that, and suddenly, come on folks, you know it, you're dying. So there's an awful lot of stuff, as several people have said. Chris said there are a lot of valedictory poems, and there are, but then Brian started writing when he was 60-something. The last poems, he knew he was ill, and he was probably dying, they didn't admit it to anybody, liver cancer.
And his mother also being in a home for so long.
Grandma Waltham, and there are some wonderful, we haven't got any hospital visiting poems. You wanted to do one of them. The outside, the other, well, didn't you want to do The Outside Others in Their Dripping Mackintosh? Is that one?
No, I didn't.
Somebody wanted to read that, and I squashed them off. But there's a whole bunch of hospital poems and illness poems and old poems at the end of one or other of the books. Good moment to stop.
Can I just ask,
Yes, John.
is Claire...
Claire hasn't turned up yet. Spoke this morning, so
No,
she ran.
it's okay. But I just love this. And it's actually, the last line is a very good one to stop for a moment on. Radio 3.
Could you say that?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Yes, of course I could. Yes. Look, Bach. I'm sorry to switch you off, but only God is allowed to go on being right all the time, in detail and in sum, and then say it all twice, back to front, upside down, and get it right again. Once for all, you are totally, absolutely, endlessly right. You are fundamentally, finally right. Now will you please shut up?
Brilliant.